Hey guys, welcome back to this follow-up video to the teaching, Aaron, that you did about navigating the successes and failures, the ups and downs of life. And one of the things that if you're in ministry for any length of time, you begin to realize that success and failure, ups and downs, and that's not atypical of life. But when it comes to ministry, it adds this unique challenge because one, our intentions are really good. We want to serve God. We want to be successful because we want to honor God. We want to honor the lead pastor. We want teenagers to be loved and discipled, and so we want the success. And then when failure comes, we begin to feel guilty, or maybe I didn't work hard enough, or maybe what did I do wrong?
Right.
And then the opposite is also sometimes true of the success, and then it goes to our heads. So in ministry, understanding how to navigate the ups and downs is what's going to help us in longevity. It's going to help us to stay even when everything is happening, and ultimately, it's a benefit to those that we're ministering and
when we're doing student ministry.
Yeah, exactly.
then we're working with the demographic of people in the church that are emotionally speaking the most up and down themselves.
The most fickle, right?
So if we're not steady through it.
Exactly. So you identify two main things with the ups and downs. The first being that success often goes to our head, and failure goes to our heart. And I think that it's a very interesting and a really good differentiation, and it's good for us to be aware of because it affects us in different ways.
Sure.
So let's start by talking about how success can go to our head. And as we talk about the ups and downs, let's specifically talk about youth leaders as ministers in ministry. And I do believe this will then apply as we continue to work with students. A lot of these same truths will apply. But I think in my years of ministry, if the more I was able to understand success and failure as a youth leader, that'll be a huge benefit to these leaders that are starting out. So let's talk about this idea of success going to our head. It's about us and how pride can be such a dangerous thing as it relates to success.
Yeah, it's addictive, right?
Yeah.
It feels great to be successful, right? And so you're going to launch a youth ministry, and you start spreading the word, and you start talking with your pastor and some of the parents in the church and some of the families, and so then there's some success, and you got X amount of kids come out for that first gathering, that first thing, and boy, that feels great. We did it. We had 5 kids come out or whatever, and and we're gonna do another gathering, and we had 6 come out this, and so the more we put effort and work into something, and then we start to see the fruit of that happen, it's just natural, quite honestly, that we want more of that, right? And you made an interesting statement a moment ago in the way you framed it, Mark, when you said that when we're doing things for ministry, and we're doing it for God, we almost feel that there's like this sense of like, yeah, isn't that the way it should work?
Yeah.
Like God should be like, man, I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
And so you know what? I'm gonna wake those teenagers up. I'm gonna get them there. I'm just gonna divinely move,
Yeah.
And so as we begin to experience some success, it could be a metric like numbers and kids that are coming, or we experience success like, hey, that student actually talked to me.
Yeah.
They actually opened up, right? As you begin to experience that, then it's natural that you want more and more and more. And if you don't allow the gospel to help you navigate the success in a very balanced and steady way, and with humility in your heart, then over time, what just naturally happens is what we talked about in the earlier video, is that it goes to our head.
Yeah.
And we begin to take credit for it, and we begin to make false assumptions like it's based on my skill, my talent. I worked hard for this. I'm really good at this. And the longer we begin to feel that, the more we begin to think that we maybe are indispensable.
Yeah.
Nobody else could do
Yeah.
what it is that I'm doing here, in this setting. And all of that leads us to a really dangerous place, Mark, because ultimately it puts my heart and my emotions and my mind into this, it's a cycle, the way that I see it. And it's this vicious cycle of I got to keep feeding the success hunger with more and more and more and more and more. One of the things that we'll unpack for you in all of the launch training videos and in all of the coaching cohorts is this understanding that discipleship and discipling students is a long process. It takes time, right? And we have to give ourselves to that process and the ups and downs of that process, right? And if you get stuck in the success trap, on the cycle of I need more and more and more, you will quickly abandon the focus of discipleship, which is a very slow and methodical and painstaking process to see happen in our lives and as students. You will abandon that for the quick fix youth ministry. Yeah. You'll abandon that for the, man, let's just give away a prize. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do that. And I'm not necessarily against some of those things. It's fun. Yeah. But what we sell out to that, and ultimately what happens is we're doing that because we as leaders need to feel successful. Yeah. Right? Right. And that's just a dangerous place to be.
Sure. Yeah. And in the chasing of success, I mean, the enemy loves when that, like, if he can get our heart positioned there to start chasing success. I mean, any major like movie star or people who've made it in life, in so many interviews you hear with them, like, I finally hit my goal, and then when I got there, I looked around and it wasn't enough. Or terrible. I got there and I realized, whoa, there's somebody else on another plateau higher than me. Well, I got to get up there, and I got to get up there.
And that's the point. You never get there.
Exactly.
You never really arrive when it comes to success as the world sees it, and quite frankly, even as sometimes the church sees it. You never arrive. That's why it's a cycle.
Right.
I always need more. I'll never listen. If you launch your youth ministry and you have 5 kids, and then the next week you need 6, and the next week you need 7, the next week, that never ends. There's no. You can tell yourself, man, if we just had 10 kids in our youth ministry, boy, I'd be happy. You'd get to 10 and you'd be like, man, I just need 15.
Right.
It never ends. And that's why it's a vicious cycle.
Sure. And resist the temptation of the comparison game too, right? Mm-hmm. Even within this cohort, with good intention, we could be celebrating our successes together in the cohort. And you're like, you come to the meeting ready to be like, man, we had 8 kids last night. I baptized 2 of them. And then somebody else is sharing their success and they had 15 kids come and you're like, oh, so much for my success.
And then there's another person that's sitting there saying, I had 1.
Yeah.
Boy, I guess I'm a failure.
Right.
I'm not successful at all.
Yeah.
One of the things I would say is helpful for you, it is helpful in youth ministry to have some metrics that you look at. Yeah. It is helpful to be able to, like, how do I gauge success, right? Yeah. And oftentimes we pick the easiest one, which is the most dangerous one, and that's the numeric metric. Mm. How many kids? You know what I mean? I would tell you that's just one of many. Like when I drive my car, I've got a bunch of different gauges there that tell me the health of my vehicle, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that's true in youth ministry as well. And attendance is just one, but there's other things like how many leaders are on my team and other things like the, life-giving conversations that we're having and kids are serving in ministry or not. Like there's other things that you can look at that will help you be more balanced.
Sure.
And be able to steady your way through like the highs and lows and the dips of numbers, because that's going to happen to all of us in student ministry.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, man, we had 10 kids show up, and then 2 weeks later, it's like with 3. Yeah. Where'd everybody go?
Right. One of the things you talk about in your teaching is that the chasing of success, or success in general, has the ability to lead towards self-dependence, self-reliance, and prayerlessness. And some of these leaders starting out, this won't necessarily show up right away, but if there's any longevity to them in ministry, I could see how in seasons of my life I could so easily go on autopilot, relying on my personal strengths and my ability to just I'm uber relational, so I can always just relate with kids and talk to kids. But man, if I started to deviate from my need for prayer, my understanding of what my role and responsibility is, it's amazing how success can drive your heart.
When you're getting ready to launch like something brand new, like a student ministry, I mean, like your prayer life is on point.
Yeah.
Like you're like, Mama, gee whiz, I signed up for this thing. And I think that's where the gospel helps us when we understand, like even when I am successful, it's God that is bringing the harvest about. Not my skill or my talent. And man, it's easy if you share a devotional with a group of kids, or maybe you even give some sort of a invitation for them to respond, like a prayer moment, or raise your hand if you want to see. It's very easy to see a student respond in that moment and take all the credit for that.
Yeah.
Right? But see, and this is what we're saying from that video where we said, Tim Keller said, apart from the gospel, all of our success goes to our head, but our failure goes to the heart. I would tell you, be really leery of that when you are trying to gauge your success or your failing based on the response of a student.
Yeah.
Because one moment, I crushed it.
Right.
I gave a devotional and one kid raised their hand, 2 kids raised their hand, I crushed it, and the very next moment you're like, man, I thought I did such a great job. Yeah. And like they fell asleep.
Yeah. That was the worst message.
They were staring at their phone the whole time, right?
Yeah. So let's conclude our video by talking about the risk that failure and how it affects our heart goes to as well. You give the illustration of the vending machine, right? I put my money in, I use the right combination of things, and I expect something in return from that. Well, in ministry and as leaders in ministry, it's easy for our hearts to go there as well. God, I'm giving you my life. I'm sacrificing my time. I'm sacrificing my money. And now I expect, and not even necessarily specifically related to the ministry you're serving, but in my own personal life, like, God, how are you allowing this chaos or this tragedy to come into my life? How is it that my wife loses her job and here I am slaving away for you and and investing in these kids? Meanwhile, my own kids are wandering away or this or that. Let's talk about how that failure and impacts your heart and how you need to keep yourself framed in that.
Yeah, I forget which the theologian that said this. I think it might have been A.W. Tozer, but it was something to the effect of, when I realize that every experience I have in life is being given to me by God or through God in order to help me become more like Jesus, it relieves a lot of the anxiety that I experience. And so I've had to learn in my life personally and also in my life in relation to ministry that failure is oftentimes an opportunity and a gift from God. And that's not saying theologically that God made me fail, that he intended for hurt or for suffering or pain to come. Life does that all by itself. It's to say that when the promise of Romans 8 that we referenced earlier in that video, when the promise of Romans 8 where it says that God works all things together for good, is that part of what is good about failure is when God uses it to make us more like Christ, right? And so, again, if we're not careful, failure turns into a vicious cycle as well. Yeah. If success makes us cycle towards, I need more and more and more and more and more, failure makes us cycle towards, I need to do whatever I need to do to never fail again, and ultimately leads us to a place of, I'm just going to give up and I'm going to quit.
Sure.
And it would be I will be really honest with you, friends, there will be times in student ministry, in youth ministry, where it will be easy to quit. Because students will let you down, and parents will get angry at you, and church leaders will say you're not meeting expectation, and kids that loved you will begin to hate you, and kids that think you're amazing will send you mean text messages, and kids that break your heart at night and you spend hours praying for sometimes will walk out on you. And that is a very real reality in youth ministry that will make us feel like a failure. And if we're not careful and we don't have the gospel to guide us, to remind us God is good and God is sovereign and God is our only hope, then we put ourselves in a compromised emotional place.
In student ministry, we had to have this mantra of whenever an issue happened or a conflict between a student or their reaction was so bizarre about something, I had to remind myself, this is about them. This isn't about me, and so it allowed me to have more empathy in dealing with that, whatever the situation is.
Resist the thought of I'm a failure. Right, because that student is acting that way, or they did this. No. But when failure and suffering and loss do come to your life, and unfortunately, that's one thing I can promise that because Jesus promised that, quite frankly, right? When that does come, understand again, God is good, God is sovereign, God is my only hope.
Right.
God's using that for good. I can steady my heart through that and not take. In the same way that I'm not going to take personal responsibility for this success, I don't always need to take personal responsibility for what is deemed to be a failure.
Sure. And we're not suggesting don't ever celebrate successes and don't ever
party it up
hard on over failures. Like, that's the beauty of doing life in community together, is right. Like we're shown the model in Christianity. Let's celebrate each other's successes together. remembering who and where the source of those successes are. And in the same way, let's gather around each other when there's failure. Let's draw strength from one another. And I think if we can keep that mindset, there'll be longevity in ministry. There'll be great joy in ministry, which is not linked to success and failure.
Right.
It's God's blessing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. We're hoping that this is helpful for you guys. I know it's a lot to unpack as you take a look at and survey the landscape of wherever you're at in the process of ministry. We're hoping that this will help frame things for you. And then ultimately, as you share your life with students, you can lead this on to them from what God is doing in your own heart. Thank you guys so much for spending some time with us. We'll see you in the next video.